The morning it happened, Colonel Josephine Eze-Whitfield was driving her mother's old Buick, the one with the cracked dashboard and the pine tree air freshener that had stopped smelling like pine sometime around 2019. She wasn't in uniform. She had just left her mother's house in Clarkson, Georgia, where she'd spent the weekend helping sort through 30 years of accumulated life after the funeral. Her mother had passed 11 days earlier. Colonel Eze-Whitfield was tired in the way that grief makes a person tired. Not sleepy, but hollowed out, like something essential had been quietly removed. She wasn't speeding. She knew she wasn't speeding because she'd been driving 10 miles under the limit the entire way. The way you do when your hands are on the wheel, but your mind is somewhere else entirely, replaying the last conversation you had with someone who will never answer back. The lights came on behind her, just past the intersection of Millbrook and Route 9. She pulled over without argument, put both hands on the wheel where they could be seen, and waited. 2 officers approached, one from each side. The one who came to her window was young, maybe 26, with the particular kind of confidence that comes not from experience, but from never having been seriously questioned. His name tag read Decker. The one who hung back near the trunk, arms crossed, watching, was older. His name tag read Mulvaney. License registration, Decker said. Not good morning. Not ma'am. Just the words flat and transactional, as though she were a form to be processed. She reached slowly for the glove compartment. May I ask the reason for the stop, officer? Decker glanced at Mulvaney. Something passed between them. A small thing barely visible, but she caught it. Tail light, Decker said. She'd had the car inspected 2 weeks ago, the day before she drove down for the funeral. She said nothing. She handed him the license and the registration. He took them and walked back to the cruiser without another word. She sat with her hands in her lap. The pine tree swayed a little from the air vent. Outside, a woman walking a dog on the opposite sidewalk paused, looked at the police cruiser, looked at the Buick, and kept walking. Decker came back. He leaned into the window with an expression she recognized. Not hostility exactly, but something adjacent to it. The look of someone who has already decided and is only now manufacturing the paperwork. Ma'am, we're going to need you to step out of the vehicle. For a tail light? There's a flag on the registration. Vehicle may be associated with an open investigation. The Buick had belonged to her mother for 19 years. Her mother had never received so much as a parking citation. Colonel Eze-Whitfield knew this. She also knew that knowing something and proving it in the next 30 seconds are 2 entirely different things. She got out of the car. Mulvaney was already moving around from the back. He was the one who told her to put her hands behind her back. He was the one who said the words, "Just routine, ma'am, while we verify," in the tone of a man who has said those exact words so many times they've lost all meaning, if they ever had any. The handcuffs went on, in full view of Route 9. A pickup truck slowed as it passed. A teenager on a bicycle stopped on the sidewalk, phone out. Colonel Josephine Eze-Whitfield, who had served 23 years in the United States Army, who had done 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, who had briefed 3-star generals and once spent 48 hours coordinating a medical evacuation operation in conditions that would make most people's knees buckle. She stood with her wrists locked behind her back next to her dead mother's Buick and said absolutely nothing. That composure was not submission. Anyone who knew her would have recognized it for what it was. The particular stillness of someone who has been in enough actual danger to know the difference between a crisis and an inconvenience, and who has learned, over a lifetime, exactly when to speak and exactly when to wait. She waited. Decker was back at his cruiser, talking into his radio. Mulvaney stood nearby, not quite watching her, not quite not watching her. A 3rd officer arrived about 6 minutes later, a supervisor, from the looks of the insignia on his collar. His name was Bertrand. He walked the scene with the expression of a man who didn't entirely understand why he'd been called, but was working hard not to show it. Can someone explain what the flag is on this vehicle? Colonel Eze-Whitfield said. Her voice was even, completely even. Bertrand looked at Decker. Decker looked at his notes. There was a pause that lasted just slightly too long. We're still verifying, Bertrand said. How long will that take? Another pause. Shouldn't be long. She nodded once and looked straight ahead. The teenager on the bicycle had gone. The woman with the dog was long gone. The morning traffic on Route 9 continued, indifferent. Here's what none of them knew, standing there in the Georgia morning sun. The phone in Colonel Eze-Whitfield's jacket pocket, the one she had not reached for, had not even glanced at. Because she understood optics better than they ever would. That phone had a contact labeled simply Operations, Forsyth, that connected directly to the administrative offices of a 2-star general she had worked under for 6 years. She had 3 other numbers that mattered. One of them went to a JAG officer she'd mentored for 4 years, who now worked federal civil rights cases out of Atlanta. One went to a retired command sergeant major, with the kind of connections that don't expire when the uniform comes off. And one, the one she didn't reach for, not yet, not quite yet, went to a number at the Pentagon that she had earned the right to call through 2 decades of doing the work when it was hard and unglamorous, and when no one was watching. She didn't reach for the phone because she wanted to give them the chance to correct themselves. People make mistakes. She knew that. She had made mistakes. She had been the commanding officer who made the wrong call under pressure and had to sit with the consequences. She believed in giving a person the opportunity to look at what they're doing and choose differently. Decker did not choose differently. He came back from the cruiser with a different energy, less certain than before, which should have been the moment he stopped, thought, and recalibrated. Instead, he doubled down in the way that insecure people double down, which is to say loudly and without logic. "We're going to need to search the vehicle," he said. "On what grounds? The flag on the registration indicates possible." "There is no flag," she said. Her voice had not changed, not 1 degree. "You know there's no flag. You've had enough time to verify that 3 times over. I'd like to know the actual reason I was stopped." Bertrand shifted his weight. Mulvaney was very still. Decker said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice." She had not raised her voice, not even slightly, and in that moment, every person within earshot, Mulvaney, Bertrand, a city worker who had slowed down in his truck on the shoulder, knew it. She had not raised her voice. He had asked her to lower a voice that had never risen, and the absurdity of it hung in the air like smoke. That was the moment she reached the decision. Not out of anger, not out of indignation, though she had every right to both. She reached it the way she had reached decisions in the field, with a clear assessment of what was happening, what tools were available, and what outcome she was obligated to work toward. She asked, calmly, specifically, whether she was free to go. Bertrand said not yet. She asked whether she was under arrest. He said no, not technically. She asked him to clarify what not technically meant, in the context of a person standing on a public road in handcuffs who had committed no crime. Bertrand did not have a good answer to that. "I'm going to make a phone call," she said. Decker started to object. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has stood in front of real threats and is therefore genuinely unmoved by a performance of one. He stopped talking. She didn't call the JAG officer first. She didn't call the command sergeant major. She called the operations number, the one connected to the administrative office of General Harold Vance, her former commanding officer, a man who she had once helped navigate a logistics crisis that saved 11 lives, and who had told her, when she transferred out of his command, that she could call that number as long as he was breathing. The call lasted 4 minutes. She didn't raise her voice during it, either. She said her name, her rank, and her current situation. She gave the location. She gave the badge numbers she had memorized in the first 2 minutes of the stop, because that was the kind of thing she always did, automatically. The way a person who has operated in high-stakes environments learns to document everything as a matter of reflex. She listened for about 90 seconds. She said, "Yes, sir," twice. She thanked General Vance and ended the call. Then she stood and waited, the same way she had been waiting the whole time, hands still technically behind her back, expression giving nothing away. The call that came into Bertrand's radio arrived 8 minutes later. He stepped away to take it. Mulvaney watched him. Decker was pretending to look at something on his phone. The city worker in the truck had not moved. He was watching from the cab, and there was something in his face that looked like the specific discomfort of a person's watching a thing they recognize as wrong and not having known, until this moment, that they would care. Bertrand came back. He was moving differently, tighter, like something inside him had been rearranged. He said something to Decker in a low voice. Decker's face went through several expressions very quickly. The handcuffs came off. Bertrand apologized. His apology was careful and formal and contained none of the words that would have made it meaningful. No acknowledgement of why it had happened, No recognition of what had just been done, in broad daylight on a public road, to a woman who had given more than half her adult life to this country. It was the apology of a man managing liability, not a man experiencing remorse. Colonel Eze-Whitfield accepted it without expression. She asked, once more, whether she was free to go. She was. She got in the Buick. She adjusted the rearview mirror. She pulled back onto Route 9 and drove. She did not look back. What happened next did not happen fast, but it happened completely. The incident report filed that morning contained a series of inconsistencies that became considerably harder to overlook once the military's Office of Inspector General opened its inquiry, which it did within 72 hours. General Vance had not made only one call. He had made several, the kind of calls that, when they reach a certain level, stop being conversations and start being notifications. As in, this is what has occurred, and this is what will happen now. Decker's personnel file, once reviewed, revealed that the stop on Route 9 was not the first time a complaint had been filed against him for a traffic stop that defied explanation. There had been 3 others in the preceding 2 years. None of them had been meaningfully investigated. All of the individuals involved shared certain demographic characteristics. The pattern was not subtle once someone with authority decided to look at it directly, and now someone with authority had decided to look. Mulvaney took early retirement within 3 weeks. His attorney released a statement. The statement was 4 sentences and said nothing. Decker was terminated following an administrative review. He appealed. The appeal was denied. Bertrand was suspended without pay and eventually reassigned. Not fired, but moved to a position that represented, in the clear language of institutional consequences, a demotion in everything but title. He gave an interview to a local paper months later in which he said he thought he'd handled it as well as could be expected under the circumstances. The interviewer asked him what circumstances he was referring to. He did not have a good answer to that either. The Clarkson Police Department reached a settlement. The terms were not disclosed, though it is a matter of public record that new mandatory training protocols were implemented in the department. In the 12 months following the incident, and that the protocols were specifically designed around what the department's own internal review called assumption-based escalation. That phrase, dry and bureaucratic as it sounds, means something straightforward. Officers making decisions about who someone is before they know anything about who someone is. Colonel Josephine Eze-Whitfield did not speak publicly about what happened for a long time. When she eventually did, in a brief statement released through her attorney, she said one thing worth noting. She said that the question people kept asking her was how she stayed so calm. She said the question people should be asking was why staying calm was necessary. Why, in the middle of her grief, in her late mother's car on a road she had driven since childhood, she had needed to calculate exactly how still to stand, exactly how level to keep her voice, exactly how many seconds to wait before she protected herself, so that the people who had put her in handcuffs without cause would not be able to say, later, that she had given them a reason. She said, "I shouldn't have needed a general's number to get those handcuffs off." Nobody should. She was right. That's the part that stays with you after the legal proceedings are over, and the department's press releases have been written, and the names have been transferred from active duty to whatever file holds the people who were allowed to simply walk away from what they did. It's not the rank. It's not the Pentagon connection. It's not even the outcome, satisfying as it was to see accountability arrive, late, imperfect, but real. It's the woman standing on Route 9 in the Georgia morning, hands behind her back, saying nothing, giving them every opportunity to stop, calculating every variable of her own safety in her head, grieving her mother and waiting, still waiting, because she had learned, the way so many people have learned, the hard way over a lifetime, that in those moments, waiting was the only option that didn't cost you something you couldn't get back. She waited, and then, when it was time, she made the call, and the rest of it followed, the way things always follow, when the truth has been documented clearly, and the right person decides they're not going to look away. Not every person standing on the side of the road has that number to call. Most of them don't. Most of them stand there and absorb it and drive home and sit with it in the particular silence of people who know that telling the story doesn't guarantee anyone will listen. That is the part of this that should keep you up at night, not the ending, which was, in its way, a good one. But the 1,000 other mornings on 1,000 other roads, where there was no general on the other end of the line, and the handcuffs stayed on, and the story never went anywhere at all. Justice shouldn't require a 2-star general. It should just require being a person. If this story made you feel something, share it, because the people who most need to hear it are exactly the ones who would prefer to believe it doesn't happen.